आप चलते हैं फोटो खिंचा लें।
And I'm an engineer.
Subject.
So I'm thinking my child will get the job like that. Yeah, once again, not practical. If he is also
Actually,
to understand file without analyzing will always make a job really useful, and that is
एक दो दिन से हमारा छवि तो चल रहा है
ठीक से
फिजिकल एजुकेटर डिग्री पे ना अपन ने
विद्या बना
कैसे मिली
always have to compete with the marketplace. If you're creating a marketplace, people will not buy unless the quality is not.
Hello. All the delegates are requested to please take their respective seats. कृपया अपनी जगह ले लें, please. We are going to start our next session. Please, जितने लोग मेरी आवाज सुन रहे हैं और जो हॉल के बाहर हैं, volunteers are also requested to please send the people inside. सभी लोगों को अंदर भेज दें और अंदर हॉल में जितने लोग हैं, अगला सेशन बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट सेशन है. लेट मी टेल यू, एक बहुत टेक्नोलॉजी का यूज हमारे बच्चों के लिए कैसे किया जाए. एक्टिविटी ऑफ डेली लिविंग स्कूल्स नहीं है, किस तरह से हम घर पर बैठ के कर सकते हैं, वो उस सेशन के अंदर क्या डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है कंट्री में, उस बारे में बात होगी. सो सब लोग प्लीज टेक द सीट्स. ऑल द डेलीगेट्स प्लीज.
सभी को नमस्कार. बता दें, अभी मैं आदरणीय पंकज बालू सर को मैं किताब भेंट कर रहा हूँ. आपको मालूम है ऑटिज्म पर हिंदी में मैंने किताब लिखा है, वो ऑनलाइन उपलब्ध है, लेकिन हार्ड कॉपी में पंकज बालू सर को दे रहा हूँ.
Sure. Okay.
Please, all of you, take your seat. We will start our next session. Our next session is on finding support inside and outside a parent and professional perspective. I will request our respected speaker, Mrs. Mary Barua ma'am, Founder Director, Action for Autism, to come on stage. And I will request respected Mrs. Indrani Basu ma'am, Founder Director of Autism Society, West Bengal, to chair the session. I will request V. Vishal from Kerala to co-chair the session. V. Vishal.
I'm leaving my bag and computer in your care.
Okay.
Which ho jayega,
Mary Barua ma'am, Director Action for Autism, National Center for Autism, India. Mary ma'am is an activist, educator, trainer and writer who has championed autism rights and understanding in India. In addition to raising awareness and convincing the Indian government to include autism in the National Trust Act, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act and policies. Our organization Action for Autism brings systematic support and understanding for autistic persons, their parents and educators. मेरी मैम के बारे में मैं एक छोटा सा चीज बोलना चाहूंगी. वर्कशॉप अटेंड किए थे इनका और वहां से एक सीख मिला कि पेरेंट्स को पहले अपने बच्चे को रिस्पेक्ट देना सीखना पड़ेगा. We have to respect our child first, then society will respect our child. ये घर से शुरू होगा. Our speaker, Mrs. Mary Barua ma'am, and our chairperson, Indrani Basu ma'am, who is our mentor, guide. हम लोग जितने भी पेरेंट है ऑटिज्म पेरेंट हम बोलेंगे वेस्ट बंगाल में और बाहर में भी हम सब लोग एक लोग का वो मेंटर है हम लोग का जो फाउंडेशन जो बेस है ना वो हम सीख पाए उनकी जो ऑटिज्म सोसाइटी वेस्ट बंगाल वहां से और उनकी गाइडेंस से और हमारे साथ कोच यहाँ है बी विशाल इज फ्रॉम केरला ही इज असिस्टेंट टीचर in a special school. Okay? So ma'am, please. Mr. Orashish Adhikari, are you there?
Good morning, everyone. I don't know why they're giving me this job. I've never chaired anyone. I've sat on a chair, but never chaired anything. But anyway, I'm so glad to introduce Mary Barua. Everyone knows about her and the incredible pioneering work she's done, especially in the field of autism, when no one knew about autism. So the huge battle, she was very much at the forefront. We shall stand up. So without further ado, I'll ask Mary to start.
Good morning, everyone. Or is it good afternoon? Good morning, still. Thank you so much for having me here to at the PARIVAAR meet. It's an absolute pleasure to see a lot of old faces and meet a lot of new people whose names I know, but I have never met them face to face. So meeting everybody face to face has been wonderful. तो आज की सकाले सवेरे का जो सेशन था, it was a really great session, and I've been taking so much of notes. कौन क्या बोल रहे हैं लिखते रहे because I really enjoyed the session. Apart from the parents who were there to listen to Sumi and especially to listen to Avik Mukherjee, sharing his experiences because और किसी से हम उतना नहीं समझ सकते हैं जितना हम people with developmental conditions जिसका अपना lived experiences है उससे हम जितना जान सकते हैं और किसी चीज से हम उतना नहीं जान सकते हैं. What I'm going to talk about is finding support both in the home and the family. Already सवेरे का जो सेशन था plus in between कुछ speakers आए थे. There's been a lot that has been shared on the support there has to be from families. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on बहुत चीज already covered हुआ है काफी. तो हम उसको थोड़ा छोड़कर और कुछ चीजों को cover करेंगे. And I'll start with a little story. So there is this young man, 22 years उसका उम्र है, and he both his parents were working, बहुत high profile jobs में काम कर रहे थे. They were earning a lot of money, and then they got a diagnosis for their son, got a diagnosis of autism. And I feel like I'm standing behind this anyway. So when they got the diagnosis, after a few years, they decided, the father decided that, you know, हम जितना कमा रहे हैं, इससे पूरा परिवार चल जा सकता है. So maybe the mother take off from her work and be with the child at home. So she did that for many years. She gave up a career. Oh, yes. So, yeah. So they decided that, you know, so the mother agreed and she said, okay, I'll stop working. And she stopped working for a very long time. Then when her son was in his teens, is this on or let's see it on? Is this on? Thank you. I feel more comfortable if I'm moving. I can't stand and talk for very long months. Okay, so they decided that she will stop working. She did for a long time. Then, when he was in his teens, तो तब उसने सोची कि हम कुछ दिन अब हम थोड़ा सा अपना करियर छोड़ दी थी, तो हम एक like part-time consultancy kind of काम करेंगे. तो वो काफी टाइम घर के बाहर रहती थी. And the father started getting very angry about that. He said कि हम जो decision लिए थे कि आप इसके साथ रहोगे. Why? Sorry, I think you're not audible enough. You're not. You can't hear me at the back.
Yes, Mary, go back to the mic.
Okay, I'll go back here. Okay, I'll stay here. Doesn't matter. So the thing is that. So what happened is that, okay, let me get my thought back. Right. So she decided to get back to working a little bit, right? Out of the home, and the father started getting very bothered. She said, our decision, he said that हमारा decision था कि आप घर पे रहकर बच्चे को देखोगे, और आप जब घर के बाहर जाते हो तो जब वो काम करना शुरू की, कभी-कभी वो लड़के को, अभी वो टीनेजर है, ताकि वो बाइक पे छेड़े दे, sometimes he would go out. And the father got very upset. He said कि आप इसको कैसे छोड़ के जा सकते हो? We had taken a decision. You will be with our son, and if our son doesn't get the support he needs, he's never going to learn anything. आपको घर रहकर उसको support करना चाहिए, right? और उसके बाद, what the father did was he hired 2 full-time support persons, जो बेटे के साथ all the time रहेगा and support the young man in his day-to-day activities, in doing everything, etc. Now, what do you think about this? Can you think of one, maybe, how do you see this situation? क्या लगता है आप लोग को इस situation के बारे में? Does anybody have any thoughts?
Yeah, it will not give any advantage.
There won't be any advantage. Why?
Because he will become more and more dependent upon the caretaker.
Thank you. Because he will get more and more dependent. जो फादर ने बोल रहा था कि उसको हर चीज में हेल्प करना चाहिए, and like the gentleman said that support does not mean that I do everything for the person. Support really means assistance that enables them to participate fully and live independently. But हम कभी-कभी जब support के बारे में सोचते हैं ना, हम independence के बारे में भूल जाते हैं. We forget that the whole idea is to help the individual be as independent as possible. Instead, हमारे अंदर क्या आ जाता है कि support का मतलब है ठीक से आज वो खाना नहीं खाया तो उसको खिलाओ, आज को खबर खाई नहीं तो खाइए दाव नहीं करना. You should have fed him, because नहीं तो खाना नहीं खाने से क्या होगा? But like we always say, एक meal नहीं खाने से कोई मर नहीं जाता है. I actually say that, right? If a child doesn't have 1 meal or 2 meals, nobody's going to die out of that. They will eat when they are hungry. But we have this understanding of support as something जहाँ पर we do everything for the individual, and that is something that we need to really keep in mind. And somebody said something today morning. Let me see if I can find it. Never mind, I can't find it. So somebody, okay, we were discussing outside, and somebody said that, Brotherly said that, we parents have to think of not being constantly on our children's heads doing everything for them. क्योंकि हम सोचते हैं कि उसके लिए सब कुछ कर देना सपोर्ट है, सब कुछ कर देना सपोर्ट नहीं है. So when we talk about support हम हमारे people with developmental conditions, they are not the only ones who need support. Families also need support, right? As Sumit mentioned, that families need a lot of support, all kinds of different kinds of emotional support, physical support. So let's quickly go through some of the supports that we think that families may need, right? So one is of course जब diagnosis होता है, एक चीज है कि families need the time to, blame, deny. जब diagnosis मिलता है, हमारे अंदर जो होता है, we want to deny, we want to blame, we are angry, we grieve. We need the time and the support उस time पे to be able to move from grief to acceptance. और ये concept हमारे देश में है ही नहीं. When families get a diagnosis, कोई support system है नहीं उनके लिए to help them come to terms with the diagnosis that their child has got, right? And इससे क्या होता है, जब हम families को ये support नहीं दे पाते हैं, जो society देते नहीं है, हमारे professionals भी नहीं देते हैं, what really happens is that families often go through life with a heavy load. They are not able to accept. And as a result, we have families who have adults who have still not been able to accept their child's diagnosis. And Avik shared something very interesting. He said that his father had not been able to accept and understand his disability till he saw Tare Zameen Par. But there isn't always going to be a Tare Zameen Par, right? সেটা অলওয়েজ হবে না, আমাদের কেউ সবসময় ফিল্ম বানাচ্ছে, একটা ভালো ফিল্ম তৈরি করে কিরকম ভাবে অ্যাকসেপ্টেন্স আসে এটা হবে না. তো we need professional support for parents when they get a diagnosis, because যখন diagnosis পাওয়া যায়, when we do get a diagnosis, what do doctors tell us? Doctors don't tell us that your child has autism or your child has a developmental disability and these are the things you can do. Doctors usually say, I have very sad news to give to you. I am very sorry to tell you that this has happened. So from the word go, हम वो जो बच्चा हुआ है उसके ऊपर एक लेबल लगा दिए हैं that এই বাচ্চাটা একটা খুব খারাপ জিনিস যেটা আমার ফ্যামিলিতে হয়েছে, a terrible thing that has happened to me. And that is the load that families often carry for years and years and years. I know families who are in the 60s and 70s who've still not been able to accept because there has never been any support for them. And that is one of the most important supports that is very, very rarely talked about. And of course, after that, there is necessary, they need information on what is available. Key information আছে, ওই যে facilities है, ওগুলোকে কিভাবে access করতে পারবো, right? Key devices আছে, communication tools আছে, government schemes আছে, যেটা in some of the other sessions they're going to be covered. So ওগুলো কিভাবে access করতে হবে? এখন যেমন UDID. Now there is this whole thing about getting UDID. Families know कि हमें UDID मिलना है, मगर कैसे करना है is something a lot of families don't know, because they've gone online and they got stuck and they don't know what to do. They don't know what time is a good time for the particular government hospital to go to. कुछ government hospitals है जहाँ पर हमें 12 बजे जाए तो अच्छा होगा, डॉक्टर 12 से 1 बजे रहता है. But families don't have that information. How many times are they going to go there? So they need access to information and schemes, etc. They need support groups. Parivar acts as a kind of a support group, but it is a support group that comes together once in a while. But families do need support groups where they can lean on each other. একজন দুজনের থেকে অন্যজনের থেকে আমি কিভাবে শিখতে পারি, জানতে পারি, অন্য লোক কিভাবে কিছু অ্যাচিভ করেছে আমি সেটা শেয়ার করে আমিও করতে পারি. Usually when families get together, very often it is about the challenges. But there is very little support on how to move forward, how to be able to share stories that enable us to do better for our children. Families also need a community of networks and friends that help them navigate life. And these are things that we really don't have. There are some, there are some organizations that do that work. I mean, our organization does it, Autism Society West Bengal does it. In Mumbai, I know Forum for Autism does it.
But the point is, we need more of these networks that help families. And most importantly, we need families to be empowered. When families are being supported, we don't want families to be told, hi, it's very sad, it is so difficult, I know we can't do anything. It doesn't help empower them. हम family को जब empower करते हैं, they have to understand their child, they have to understand the child's challenges, and they have to understand how they can advocate for their rights and their children's rights. And empowerment is very important because যখন আমরা family কে empower করতে পারি, only then, like somebody said in the last session, or I think the introducer just said, that when families are empowered, our children are empowered. When parents are empowered, our children are empowered. An empowered parent can empower other parents also, right? So these are the things that parents really need, which is really important for parents to have. Now, moving on. What support do neurodivergent people need? What do people who live with developmental conditions need? उनको को क्या ज़रूरत है in terms of support? First of all, they need support that tells them that they can. Because, we constantly hear of limitations. They have limitations. And the most important thing in this is that हमारे जे neurodivergent लोग आचे, the people we have जिसका developmental conditions है, वो लोग all the time सुनते हैं, हमारे DSM-3 हो या कुछ भी diagnostic tool हो, उसमें all the time सुनते हैं इसका ये limitations है. These are the challenges that they have. These are the difficulties they have. They constantly hear of their limitations. But what diagnostic tool? So first, the point I was going to make is, ये सुन के क्या होता है ना? Our people, they internalize this bias that society have about them, and they also start thinking, yes, we have limitations. They don't have limitations. They just have a different way of being. It is like, I have friends जो हाथ से खा नहीं सकते हैं. They don't know how to eat with their fingers. They don't know how to manipulate the food and eat it. Do they have a limitation? Are they weird? No. They just come from a different culture. जहाँ हाथ से खा नहीं सकते हैं. I have friends जो cutlery use नहीं कर सकते हैं, जो खाली हाथ से ही खा सकते हैं. क्या उसका कोई limitation है? नहीं, वो limitation है नहीं. That is a culture that they are from. Disability likewise is a kind of culture. And हमें वो सोचना होगा, हमारे disabled लोग को ये दिमाग में चला गया है that I have limitations. And I quickly share a story. We have a young man who came to work with us. This was about 12 years back. He is autistic. He had finished his schooling actually, and was very interested in working in accounts. He loved numbers. और वो कहीं पर काम किया था, but he had a very bad experience at the place he was working, and all his life he had been told by his family, by his employee, by his schools, just like Avik shared earlier, that he was less, that he was stupid, that he was useless, that he wasn't good enough, that he was bad. He would actually tell us, I'm actually not smart enough, I'm not good enough. But actually he was very, very smart, and his work was amazing, absolutely amazing. And then when he stayed with us, we trained him, and eventually we placed him in I don't want to mention the company, but in a multinational company where he's working. He's been working for the past 4 years, and he's a valued employee in the account section. But यही इंसान को, he's always heard, जब वो छोटा था तब से, that he was less, that he was bad, just like Avik mentioned earlier. And he had internalized it. Avik has come out of it. But this young man has internalized. He thinks that, I'm not good enough. And a lot of people with disabilities internalize this bias, this ableism, just society उनके दिमाग में डालते हैं. And that is why it is so important to focus on what they can, right? and focus on the capacity. ये और एक चीज हमारे बोलते हैं ना कि वो ये नहीं, हम always, you know, when in many of the reports हमारे professionals, right, and I'm also a professional, हमारे professionals जब report लिखते हैं, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't speak, they can't do whatever. It's all about what they can't do. When they write, if somebody writes a report for me saying, oh, Mary cannot reverse quickly for down a 10-yard lane. Mary does not know how to cook biryani. Mary does not know how to do any online transfers. Mary does not know how to use an ATM. All of which is true about me, right? Does anybody describe me like that? Nobody does. But that is how we describe people with disabilities and we describe people with developmental conditions. We talk about what they cannot do. We don't say, we say, oh, he cannot speak. We don't say he speaks 2 words. The words are this and this, and he uses them meaningfully when talking about. Or he does not use any words to communicate, but rather communicates by taking me by the hand or taking people by the hand or picking objects and showing them. We don't do that. हमारा पूरा report होता है नहीं कर सकता, नहीं कर सकता, नहीं कर सकता. So we start off by thinking कि कुछ नहीं कर पाएगा. Then how are we going to support them? Our support is going to be equally skewed. हमारा support भी उतना गंदा तरीके का होगा क्योंकि हमारा दिमाग में है कि ये तो कर ही नहीं सकता है. And that is something that we really, really need to change. And I think Sunit said this, that disability is in the eye of the beholder. Absolutely. Disability is in the eye of the beholder. I either see you as, oh, a woman who can't do anything. There is this thing also, and this was very strong. औरत है तो कुछ नहीं कर सकती है. ये तो था 70 साल पहले. औरत तो बेकार था, इससे कुछ नहीं होता है. And the same thing happens with persons with disabilities. They are bekar, they can't do anything. So we have to first bring about this shift in, and remember that when we say कि ये नहीं कर सकता, वो नहीं कर सकता, there is nobody who can do everything. दुनिया में कोई ऐसा इंसान नहीं है जो सब कुछ कर सकता है. Is there anybody here who needs help of a CA to file their income tax?
Yes.
कोई है? Is there anybody here who cannot drive and needs somebody to take them around? Is there anybody here who cannot cook?
I can't.
So lots of people who can't do lots of things. Is there anybody here who has difficulty in making bank transfers online?
To some extent, yes.
So there is nobody who is able to do everything. This ableism is something we have to take out of our heads. Nobody. We have to look at the interdependence of people. We are all interdependent. We all need, for instance, emotional support, right? All of us who are parents, we know we need emotional support with our, dealing with the difficulties we have while we navigate a world that does not support our child. दुनिया जो हमारे बच्चे को support नहीं करता है, उसको navigate करने के लिए हमें बहुत emotional support का जरूरत होता है, right? We need that. Persons with disabilities, by the way, also need emotional support, something we forget. हम भूल जाते हैं कि our children need emotional support because they live in a world where they are a minority. People with intellectual developmental disabilities are a minority. They live in a majority world. And all of us who live in a majoritarian world, who belong to the majority, have to remember, just like we need emotional support, they need emotional support also. And I just want to quickly add one more thing. I was talking about diagnosis earlier. When we go for diagnosis, so for instance, if my child my 6-year-old has a kidney problem, right? I don't know. I've done the test and I go to the doctor and the doctor realizes there may be a need for a kidney, what's it called? Organ transplant, right? How does the doctor give me the information? Does he give me the information in front of the child? Or do they talk to me away from the child?
Away from the child.
Usually, doctors, when it's something like this, they don't say it in front of the child. When it's a physical disability, in my experience, I've gone with various friends whose children had difficulties. They said, "Acha," they send the child away and talk to the parents. But when they give the diagnosis, they do it in the presence of the child, which is fine, because we give diagnosis in the presence of the child. But it's how we say it that matters. In our organization, we do it in the presence of the child. But when doctors give the diagnosis, the child is sitting right there, and the doctor says, "Oh, the child has autism, ye zyada kuch nahi kar payega, ye school nahi ja payega, you should have another child, arekta bachcha howa uchit." You know, because like somebody else said earlier, that you should have another child because the child will not be able to do anything. So imagine what happens to the person with disability. He sits there and he hears, "I'm this bad, sad, tragic thing that has happened to my parents. I'm this terrible thing," and families discuss in front of children, we do it. "I'm this terrible thing that has destroyed my parents' life. Because of me, my parents can't do this. Because of me, my parents can't do that." And then we expect our children to be able to learn well. We say, "हम इतना support करते हैं मगर सीख नहीं रहे हैं." But if I have such low self-esteem, again what Avik said, if my self-esteem is so short, हम सीखेंगे कैसे? मेरा सीखना बहुत मुश्किल है जब मेरा self-esteem ऐसे absolutely destroyed हो गया है. So persons with disabilities, especially with developmental conditions, their self-esteem is often ground into the earth. So they need a lot of support in order to feel worthy, because they are worthy. वो worthy है, मगर उसको worthy feel करने के लिए, that is the support they need. And when I'm supporting, it has to come from this sense of worth. And you know, हम जब support करते हैं, you know, I've been watching a lot of families bringing their children in, right? And please pardon me, but I want to say this: some of them do need physical support. Like Sunil does need physical support. Many of them don't. But we are bringing our young adults in, holding their hands like this. And I'm walking, and my young adult is being dragged around after me. Why are we doing that? আমি যদি হাতটা ছেড়ে দিয়ে হাঁটি, আমি যদি ওর হাতটা ছেড়ে হাঁটি কি হবে? যদি মনে হয় ও পালিয়ে যাবে কোথায়, ঠিক আছে আমি হাতটা ধরি, আমি এরকমভাবে হাঁটতে পারি। আমি যদি আমার হাজবেন্ডের সঙ্গে যাচ্ছি আর ও আমার হাতটা ধরে টেনে টেনে নিয়ে যায়, আমার কিরকম লাগবে? আমার स्पाउस যদি আমার হাতটাকে ধরে ऐसे खींचकर हमारा स्पाउस ले जाता है, हमें कैसा लगेगा? How would my sense of worth be? So you know, we have to be very mindful. और हम जानी पेरेंट्स का जब এটা করে हम समझते हैं, हम केयर से कर रहे हैं, हम सोच रहे हैं कि यू नो उसका कुछ बुरा ना हो जाए, ये सोच कर रहे हैं। मगर हमें ये भी माइंडफुल होना है कि ये भी एक इंसान है, ये खाली डिसेबल्ड व्यक्ति नहीं है। ये खाली ये जो हमारे दिमाग में आ जाता है that they are disabled, that's it, that's the only identity they have. तो उसको दिमाग से निकालकर सोचना होगा ये भी एक इंसान है, इसका भी एक you know personhood है जिसको हमें रिस्पेक्ट करना बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है। जो सुदेशता बोल रही थी डिग्निटी के बारे में, that is very very important. And people with disabilities don't want to be made to seem as you know these useless people. They don't want to be made put on a pedestal either, because pedestal में डालकर हम भूल जाते हैं, right? Pedestalize करके हम भूल जाते हैं। They are ordinary people like you and me. They don't have to have great skills to be respected. हम सब में सबके पास कितना great skills रहता है। We are all average people. So हमारे लोग को भी average people के हिसाब से देखना बहुत ही जरूरी है, right? I still have some time. All right. So yeah. So जब diagnosis मिलता है, one of the supports that families need and children need is to have not a negative kind of a diagnosis. And if there are medical professionals here, if there are people who can impact medical professionals as advocates who can work with medical training, we have to think of how to give families a positive or a neutral, you don't have to be positive, just give a neutral diagnosis. That this is the diagnosis, rather than giving a negative diagnosis, right? And uske baad, once the diagnosis is done, what is really, really important is for the person to receive acceptance from parents and family. Because jab tak, somebody was talking earlier, ki when we talk about acceptance, we talked about how, how it made him feel to not have acceptance from his father. And he mentioned this because father se jab usko acceptance mila, it means a lot to a person, right? तो हम फैमिली से जब तक एक्सेप्टेंस नहीं आता है, हम चाहते हैं क्या? We are all talking about social and community acceptance, social and community support. उसके बारे में बात कर रहे हैं ना? पहले वाला सेशन था about the social support. वो social support आएगा कब? जब तक हम में से हमारे बच्चे के तरफ जो लेंस से हम अपने बच्चे को देखते हैं is, something to be ashamed of, something to be embarrassed about. हर बार हम जब embarrassment, both of you mentioned something in the morning which I really liked. She said, अभी हमारे यहाँ पर changes काफी आया है because yesterday some people had a meltdown and nobody bothered, everybody carried on. And that is lovely. That, and I saw it earlier also, there were some of our young people talking, making a noise. Everybody carried on. Because they have a right to make that noise. They have a right to use themselves because they're making a noise because they need to do it. So ये जो change आया है is really, really nice, right? But the thing is that ये चीज हमें community में भी करना है. Because हम जब, I'll quickly give another example. How much time do I have? Yeah, I'll quickly give another example. Several years, about 8 years back, there were many incidents when people are flying. एक incident हुआ था कि एक family अपने बेटे को लेकर, couple अपने बेटे को लेकर, they were flying somewhere and they were at the airport, and the young man was making a bit of a noise, right? And I know this the whole story because I know somebody who was there at that time. Because media में दिया था he was making a noise. She said that he wasn't making a noise. He was going. He was making this noise, right? And जब ऐसा noise करते हैं, हम लोग usually क्या करते हैं? And the parents kept doing that. Then they kept saying, "Eram korbi, to jao na, niye jao na, ekhane thakbi, right? Eram korbi to plane jao na, ame jekhane jachilo whatever they won't go. I'm cancel kar denge. Stop doing that. This is that." So they started, and eventually they slapped the boy, right? So the more they did it, jitna kar raha tha utna, because the boy is now getting anxious. वो क्यों कर रहा था? Most probably to help himself feel regulated. Airport में इतना आवाज, sounds, people, so much of unpredictability. He was doing that to kind of regulate himself. But when the parents did that, तो क्या हुआ? और ज़्यादा आवाज होना शुरू किया. And the parents are hitting him. Now when the parents are hitting him, तब बाकी लोग क्या सोच लिया? ये तो प्रॉब्लम है ना. पेरेंट्स इसको मार रहा है, इसका तो कोई डिफिकल्टीज है, ये एयरक्राफ्ट में जाएगा तो हम कैसे फ्लाई करेंगे? ये यहाँ पर कंट्रोल नहीं कर सक रहा है, ऐसा आवाज करता है, एयरक्राफ्ट में और कुछ कर देगा. तो उस सिचुएशन में वो जो एक्सेप्टेंस नहीं रहने से किस चीज का इम्पैक्ट हुआ? Community acceptance चला गया. The community wasn't willing to accept him. So हम जब as parents हम अपने बच्चे को accept नहीं करते हैं, right? Then what happens? The community says इसमें तो कुछ होगा ही. अपना parents ही इसको सोचता है ऐसा है. If I am embarrassed about my son when I go out, right? So there is this mother who gone out with her son. And the son was, was feeling hassle. Usually when they feel hassle, ये जो हम behavior बोलते हैं ना, behavior modification and all that, हमारा behavior modification का जरूरत नहीं है, because वो जो behaviors होता है, those are behaviors of protest. हमारे बच्चे का जो especially with autistic people and also with other developmental disabilities, जब behaviors होता है, that's a protest against what the environment is doing to the person. It's a behavior of protest, right? And so when a child has gone out, say this is an instance of a child in a mall, jahan par this young man, he was getting bothered and he was saying, no. And then the mother said that, supposing if the mother had said, as often happened, stop doing that, you're in a mall, this, that, immediately 5 people would come and say, ye kyun kar raha hai? There's something wrong with him. और वो बच्चे का जो है वो भी और बढ़ जाएगा, because he will get more and more dysregulated. But if the mother were to say, or the father, I'm saying mother because usually fathers don't go out that much with their kids, but mothers do. So if the mother says, or the father says that, I know you're feeling bothered, come, let's sit down over here for 2 minutes, we both sit down and you feel better. What do you think would happen? आस-पास लोग देख रहा है, ठीक है, doesn't matter. I will share with you, my son was quite a hero in all these matters, and Indrani would know. So, and one time I remember I was flying, and see, my understanding of autism has evolved. अभी हम और जानते हैं जो पहले उतना नहीं जानते थे, and I did not realize how much transitions absolutely, fragmented him, which I've really begun to understand in the last 5-10 years. So we were on an aircraft, and he was feeling really hassled. And he, did, and then he tried licking me. Now, I could have got very hassled. What I did, he had a window seat, of course. So I got up on my seat and I stood like this, put my leg, this was before we had started. We were still seating, boarding was going on. I put my leg on my seat and I turned towards him. So then an air hostess came running. Is there anything? I said, no, nothing. It's okay. And she walked off. Now, if I had looked all bothered and I said, no, it's okay, I'm trying to manage him and all that, she would have said, get off the aircraft. So the thing is that I have to be accepting and understand कैनो कोचे की कोचे समझने का कोशिश करें, हमारा अंडरस्टैंडिंग बढ़ाए. Because yes, we have been given a situation where we may not understand our children that well. So we have to learn. Just like if I marry a spouse from a different culture, I have to learn. If I had married somebody from Uganda, I know nothing about Ugandan culture. I would have had to learn that my spouse's culture. And my spouse would have had to learn my culture, right? So the same way we have to learn our children's culture to understand them. और वो बहुत ही जरूरत है, ठीक है? So acceptance जब तक हम में नहीं रहेगा, we cannot accept acceptance from the community. And acceptance from the parent and the family is the foundation of the support our people will get from the community. Another thing I quickly want to mention is, we talk about support in school. Our children are some of the most bullied kids in school, particularly autistic kids, right? And developmental disabilities, बहुत bully होता है school में. And वो यदि उसको पता नहीं है कि घर में हमें कितना लोग accept करते हैं, how will he deal with the bullying that happens in school, right? The parent and the family and the home is the safe haven. This is the place where ये एक जगह है बच्चे को जानना चाहिए जहां पर हमें लोग completely accept करते हैं. हम जो भी है हमको embrace कर लेते हैं. जब हमारे बच्चे वो समझेंगे तब बाहर दुनिया में जो भी difficulties होता है, they would be able to deal with it better. Because हमें पता है ये जगह है जो हमारे लिए is everything, and that will support me completely. So acceptance from the family is absolutely critical. I won't talk too much about communication. I don't know how much time I have. I have some time. But we've talked about it. But to be, supportive, intentional partners, I made a note of हम जब सुनते हैं to our people, हम intentionally नहीं सुनते हैं, carefully, mindfully नहीं सुनते हैं. So this young man, he is in an assisted living. तो वो घर जा रहा था with his not घर जा रहा था, he was going to visit his parents. So the parents came to pick him up, and he had just started staying at the assisted living. And after a month or so, the parents were taking him to visit them. And where he was going, he said, "हम यहाँ नहीं रहेंगे." So the parents thought that he was saying, "हम यहाँ नहीं रहेंगे," that I will not stay here anymore at the assisted living. And they had to be helped to see, after conversation with the young man, showing him pictures, giving him choices of words, that what he was saying is asking, हम यहाँ और नहीं रहेंगे, हमें यहाँ रहना है, हमें यहाँ अच्छा लगता है. When given a choice between living with his parents and living here, he chose this. But because हम intentionally नहीं सुनते हैं, mindfully नहीं सुनते हैं, हम oftentimes miss कर जाते हैं. And the other quick thing I want to talk about communication and supporting is that हम बहुत time हमारे बच्चे का communication को support नहीं करते हैं because हम सोचते हैं कि यदि वो ज़्यादा communicate नहीं करता है, वो बोलता नहीं है, तो ये तो समझता कुछ नहीं है. You know, not speaking is almost equal to not knowing anything. ये बहुत common understanding है amongst parents, amongst professionals, कि a child who doesn't speak has nothing to say. And that is so not correct. We should not need to have an individual like Atrik or Soumya or somebody who is communicating through tablets for us to understand that even if they don't speak, they are thinking people. ये हमको मान लेना है. Even a child who's like this all day, doing this the whole time, it does not mean कि उसका दिमाग में कुछ है नहीं. He too or she too has a lot. And to communicate, to understand, to feel. और जब the minute we accept and understand that, और हमारा उसको समझने का तरीका change करे, they will start communicating with us. So this whole thing that I don't have it here, that not speaking is equivalent to not having a mind, not having any personhood. इसको change करना बहुत जरूरी है. What if Bhagavati had thought the same way about Aritrik? I don't know how many of you know about this young man who communicates through a communicator. And you don't always got to have an electronic communicator. You could communicate with cards, you could communicate with signs, you could communicate with gestures, you could communicate with looks, right? So there are multiple ways of communication that we have to be open to. That is the support that we really need to do. Education, I won't go too much into it. I just want to mention the thing about shadow teaching because I don't have too much time. I quickly want to mention the thing about shadow teachers. You know, shadow teachers are support. I don't know यहाँ पर कितना होता है. दिल्ली में तो बहुत होता है. I don't know in other places. Shadow teachers have become, you know, people who create dependence because people have no idea how to be a good shadow teacher. We have them in the classes making the kids do everything, and the kids are ending up being dependent rather than learning how to fly. So in education, that's one of the things that is a really worrying support system that has come in. A good shadow teacher has to be able to help the child move further and further towards independence and not create dependence. And I just wanted to quickly mention that. I won't talk too much about daily living. I'll skip. Social inclusion, काफी बात हो चुका है. Social inclusion, yeah, friendships are difficult. But I know there are lots of new things coming up. I don't know if ASWD still has their YAR program running. There are fabulous programs called YAR where young people got together. There is something called Buddia. There is an app. I don't know if you all know about that. And many of our people, हमारे काफी लोग हैं जो बहुत social media use करते हैं. People with disabilities, if they have access, they tend to use a lot of social media. I know this Down syndrome kid who uses that tablet like, you know, nobody's taught him. And I asked the mother, and his communication is difficult for people to understand. And I asked the mother when we were talking about communication, have you introduced some kind of an app to him? And she said no, for speech, for communication. So how we can use these apps and tablets that people are using? So Buddy Up is a great app. I haven't put it here. Buddy Up. There's a great app that parents can access, persons with disabilities can access for them to get friends. Anybody's interested in that? I'll just jump from this. I really want to, because I'm running out of time, I want to quickly talk about, two things. One is adult living, and Sudeshna shared some good examples of adult living. One of the things that happens in a lot of adult living is that, again, there is this constant support that is provided. और उससे क्या हो रहा है कि जो constant support, the adult living, the whole idea is about independence. And our people, persons with developmental conditions, just like हम continuously learn करते हैं. We don't ever stop learning. I have just, I used to do the tried doing the Rubik's Cube when I was a kid, and I couldn't do it and I gave it up. And now suddenly watching, up to cubing competitions देखते हैं? Nobody watches the cubing competition? अच्छा, okay. So वो देखकर आप suddenly realize I can maybe solve the Rubik's cube. So I got excited about learning how to try and solve it. We can all learn at any time in our lives, and so do our people. जब वो assisted living में जा रहे हैं, it should not be a place where they're constantly supported. We have to still work on the independence. You know, my son, like a lot of people with autism, was a terrible brusher. He just could not brush his teeth properly. He would chew up the brush. But the lot of deep sensitivities that he had. But in his assisted living, they kept at it, supporting him in the right way. Now he's actually brushing his teeth, something I never got around to doing. Because I would leave him and I'll travel all the time. So हम consistently नहीं दे पा रहे थे, इसके लिए consistency का बहुत ज़रूरत था. So people can learn all the time, but in a lot of assisted living that I've seen, is that there is too much support being given to the adults. And the whole idea of assisted living is to be as independent as possible. So something that we need to be a little bit mindful of. I just want to do this last thing, then I'll be able to finish in time. Yes, I'll finish in time. Dignity, that Sudeshna talked about, dignity and respect. We have to, you know, whatever we do with our people with developmental conditions, we can never forget that they are people, वो भी इंसान है, उसका भी मेरा जितना dignity के हक है, उसका भी dignity में उतना ही हक है. So dignity and support. So some of the things that work for them very well is providing support, structure in their lives. Because हम जब structure देते हैं, then there is a lot of clarity. Because हम very often हमारे बच्चे को हम पूरा information देने भूल जाते हैं. हमको पता है कहाँ जा रहा है, क्या होने वाला है, क्या करेंगे. हमारे बच्चे कभी-कभी उतना हमें नहीं पूछते हैं. जो हमारा typically developing बच्चा बहुत पूछ लेगा, हमारे children with development conditions कभी-कभी उतना डिटेल में नहीं पूछते हैं. मगर क्या उसको जानकारी उसका जानने का जरूरत है? Of course है. उसको बहुत जानने का जरूरत है. मगर वो कभी-कभी पूछ नहीं पाता है क्योंकि वो पूछने मांगता है मगर either words formulate नहीं कर पाता है या हम बहुत busy है, हमारे सुनने का टाइम नहीं है. तो giving them information is very important. और जब वो information को हम visually दे देते हैं, and believe me, this is not only for autism. We have people with cerebral palsy, we have people with Down syndrome. Visual information is like a magic. Because कभी-कभी दिमाग में पकड़ के रखता है. हम कोई visual information use करते हैं life में? करते हैं ना? मेरा जो planner है ना, without a planner, I don't exist. I have to look at my planner every day, right? Otherwise, I'm completely confused. I have to continuously keep looking at the program today to remind myself इसके बाद क्या होगा. That's a visual, and we don't give enough visuals to our people. So the structure and providing structure in their lives, predictability in their lives, using visuals is absolutely critical. It leads to happy people. Self-determination and decision making. Very often हम उससे अपना decision लेने नहीं देते हैं, right? हमारे बच्चे के साथ क्या होता है? Suppose if you are going to a wedding, शादी में जा रहे हैं, और यहाँ पर तो शादी weddings are big things, right? शादी में जा रहे हैं, हम ये कपड़ा निकाले हैं, I want my son to wear this, but he doesn't want to wear it. क्या हम छोड़ देते हैं? ना हम जबरदस्ती करते हैं कि वो पहने. हम जबरदस्ती करते हैं किसी को पहनना है. मगर supposing हम शादी में जा रहे हैं, I'm going, and my mother-in-law tells me, don't wear this, wear the other sari. हम क्या willingly पहन लेते हैं? ना हम हमको वो अच्छा नहीं लगता, हम ये पहनेंगे. I assert my what's the word I was going? Autonomy. हम अपना autonomy assert करते हैं. अपने बच्चे को हम कितना बार autonomy assert करने देते हैं? We don't. We are constantly forcing our wishes onto our children in their everyday lives. Right? And if we do that, how will they move towards independence? If I've never been able to, choose myself, if I've never been given the right to take my own decisions about You know, if I eat a little bit slow, I'm forced to eat fast. Not because I'm eating too slow, but because my mother wants to move on and my father wants to move on and do something else. আমি যদি চিবিয়ে না খাই, ভালো করে না চিবোই, আমি ওইভাবেই খাই। আমি 2-3 बार बोले दिलाम, but हमें क्या जबरदस्ती करने का वो है, हक है? How many of us here chew properly before we swallow? Most of us don't. But and I have seen parents who don't themselves chew up, forcing their children. ठीक करे चिबो, भालो करे चिबो. So we are constantly forcing our will on our children. We have to give them the right to choose what they want to wear, to eat what they want. I'm not saying not eat healthy food, but at the same time, you do not force your our will on our children. So जब तक हम ये नहीं करेंगे ना, वो अपना डिसीजन लेना नहीं सीखेगा और उसके बाद हम बोलते हैं वो इंडिपेंडेंट नहीं होता है। कैसे इंडिपेंडेंट होगा? अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं देते हैं। अपॉर्चुनिटीज इससे आता है, ये सब चीज से स्टार्ट करना पड़ता है, छोटा छोटा चीज से स्टार्ट करना पड़ता है और जब तक हम नहीं करेंगे they will not be independent, they cannot be independent. I know it's a difficult thing in India because in India most of us don't have much independence in की चाकरी करबो, कौन सा नौकरी करेंगे हमारे पेरेंट्स डिसाइड करते हैं, किससे शादी करेंगे हमारे पेरेंट्स डिसाइड करते हैं, कितना बच्चा होगा हमारे पेरेंट्स डिसाइड करते हैं, तो हमारे लिए थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है। But even then, this is something that we have to think about. Acknowledgement of experiences and feelings. One of the things, and I have to cover this, we really acknowledge and support the experiences and feelings of our people. So what do I mean by that? Supposing if my child is upset about something, okay, and is having a bit of a meltdown, what's the first thing we say? You should not be angry. Stop being angry. बोलते हैं या नहीं बोलते हैं? गुस्सा नहीं करना है. क्यों गुस्सा कर रहे हो? हम बोलते हैं क्यों गुस्सा कर रहे हो? बोलते हैं या नहीं? कौन नहीं बोलता है? हाथ उठाओ. कौन नहीं बोलता है कि गुस्सा क्यों कर रहे हो? गुस्सा मत करो. कोई बोलता है? नहीं बोलता है? कोई नहीं, सब कोई बोलते हैं ना. अच्छा, ना सोच लीजिए, हम गुस्सा होते हैं तो हमारे बच्चे का क्यों हक नहीं है? हमारे बच्चे का क्यों नहीं हक नहीं है? वो क्यों नहीं गुस्सा हो सकता है? So instead of saying stop being angry, we can say I understand something is bothering you. Let's talk about it. I understand you were upset. I understand some experiences हम कभी acknowledge नहीं करते हैं. And that's the emotional support. Just like we need emotional support, our children also need emotional support. And supporting them in their self-advocacy. But that will only come when we do all the other things that I talked about. And I think I have to finish now. Oh, this is a little video I won't show. I just wanted to say that nobody is a single story. हमारे लोग खाली disabled नहीं है. They are also people, they are also singers, they are dancers, they are painters, they are eaters, they are foodies, they are people who love to go for walks, they are people who like to take holidays. They are multiple beings. They are not only a disabled person. Thank you.
Okay, I think, how do you sum up? Well, everything she said was important, so there's not much to sum up. But basically, I'll just go over a few things. I think that what Mary started at the time when children are diagnosed. ওই সময় কি করে informationটা professionalsরা দেয় has a huge impact on the parents. It can be given in a very negative way. এটা পারে না, এটা ভীষণ খারাপ খবর, ফিউচারে কিছু হবে না. And that really impacts the future of at least quite a bit of how that family is going to handle and manage the situation. Other things that she talked about was support is not doing everything for the child, but support means enabling the child. You're helping that child to move forward, gain more skills, and be as independent as much as possible. And of course, she talks about a different kind of support from government schemes, communications, support groups, network of friends, Also, the importance of empowering families. If you empower families with the right information and access to different information, you also empower the child. The other thing that I think she put a lot of emphasis on is that nobody's really independent. We are interdependent. We all depend on each other, and same way with our children. And the need to understand the culture of the disability. Whatever disability your child has, is a specific culture to it. I think people with the hearing impairment are very proud of that culture. They really, and I think people with autism too are now, are also kind of coming up with this. That they do have identify strongly with a particular culture, and they are very proud of that. So I think it's important that we understand our children's culture, whichever disability it is, and that will help us to make decisions and work with them. And there's a lot of emphasis on emotional support, not just for the families, also the person with disability, and how negative discussion in front of that person can very badly affect that individual. And people with disability often have very low esteem, and that can be for many reasons. And the key to acceptance in the community is how quickly we as parents accept and understand our children. If we understand them, if we can give them the kind of support they need, help them to move forward, then that will help society to accept. And then again, she talked a bit about communication, and I think that's something that she said was very important, that we don't always listen mindfully to our children. We kind of say, okay, I know the pattern, I know what you want, but we don't really listen. And if we really listen, sometimes we're quite surprised at what they're saying. And of course, she talked a lot about housing and residential. And we have to remember that not a place where their life is going to be static. They too will age, become middle age, old age, but at the same time, their life will evolve, even living in an assisted living place. And the right to respect. Right to respect is really key to independence. If we respect, especially our children as parents, I think parents, even I forget sometimes, we need to respect our children and treat them in a respectful manner. And if we do that, others will too. And if they feel respected and empowered, then they will become independent. And I think that was the thing that that was my takeaway from what Mary said. The last point is the organizers have said there is no time for question answers because people have flights to catch. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you, मैम. अभी हम लोग थोड़ा फेलिसिटेट करेंगे मेरी मैम को और इंद्रानी मैम को, और थैंक यू विशाल. I will request चैताली मैम. Very good, ma'am. Thank you once again. Our chair, Mrs. Indrani Basu, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And our co-chair, B. Vishal. Thank you. Thank you. We will move to our next session.